In today's video, I am showing you how I make 5 dinner meals for my family of 6 for $45. When it comes to grocery budgeting, I've found you are juggling 4 things: money, time, nutrition, and taste. If you are low on either money or time, nutrition and taste is usually affected. The goal here was to create 5 meals that my family would enjoy for the lowest cost possible. We started out by going to Aldi. If you do not have one in your area, these groceries will cost you about $58 from Walmart. Here are the items I bought: a head of cabbage, 1 box of whole mushrooms, 3 pounds of onions, and a 5-pound bag of potatoes. I also got 2 Roma tomatoes, and I did not film that part. For cheese, we got 1 block of sharp cheddar and 1 block of mozzarella, 1 Kielbasa sausage, 1 pound of ground sausage, a block of butter, a half a gallon of whole milk, a dozen eggs, and 3 pounds of ground turkey. I do apologize for the bad filming. This was my first time filming in a grocery store. I also got 1 bag of flour and 1 packet of yeast, 2 cans of diced tomatoes, 1 bag of pepperoni, 1 box of spaghetti, and a container of garlic. We got home and had quite a bit of work ahead of us. Monday was stromboli and prepping for the rest of the week. Starting off with making sauerkraut. So we started with the head of cabbage and shredded it up. I have tried chopping it, but I feel like it just works better if you just shred it with like a cheese shredder. If you have a food processor, obviously that's the way to go. You add a little bit of salt and massage it, mix it in, and let it sit for 15 minutes. And by the way, if you're not a sauerkraut person, you could instead use this shredded cabbage to make coleslaw or saute it up with some of the other meals. While we were waiting the 15 minutes, I started to brown the sausage for stromboli. After it was cooked, I did not throw away the grease because we are going to be using this for Tuesday's dinner. Once the 15 minutes are up, massage the cabbage and squeeze it. It should have like a wet feel to it. Once you feel like you're there, you're going to pack it into a jar or container, and you're going to press down until the liquid covers the top of the cabbage. You're going to use a few of the outside leaves to press it down. Put the lid on and place it in a dark cupboard, and that's all for now. So now we're going back to the stromboli. We are going to cook our first pound of turkey. So ground turkey is very cheap, but it is pretty bland compared to beef or sausage, so I like to doctor it up as much as possible. While you're cooking it, add some garlic, salt, and pepper. If you have anything else in your cupboard, throw them in too. I added some chicken bouillon, but if you do not have these extras, you'll be just fine. Once this is cooked, add in the sausage and mix it very well. I did end up adding a little bit of red pepper flakes just for a little extra heat. So now it's time to make our stromboli. So we're going to start with the dough. I'm using a recipe from Hope's Table, my favorite cookbook, and I did also use a tablespoon of sugar and a tablespoon of oil. If you do not have these, this will turn out just fine. We're going to double this recipe, so we're using 2 packets of yeast and 5 cups of flour. Sometimes I make this with my mixer and sometimes I make it by hand. I prefer kneading it by hand because I feel like you can tell exactly when the dough is ready. You can kind of see the consistency we're looking for here. Once it's there, you're going to cover it for 20 minutes, and during the rise time, we are going to prepare the fillings. We're going to go ahead and dice the onions. We're going to do 3 onions just so we can use them later in the week. Then we're going to rinse and slice the mushrooms, put them back in the container. We're going to take about 4 to 5 mushrooms and dice them as small as possible. I'm going to go ahead and shred half the cheddar cheese and half the mozzarella cheese. If you want, you can shred it all and save it in a bowl for later, but I just like to shred it as I need it. I just think it tastes a little fresher. Then you're going to split the turkey sausage mix in half and put half away for later and take out the pepperoni. Once your dough has risen for 20 minutes, you're going to take it out, split the dough in half, and roll it out. So for this part, I just want to say if you haven't had much experience with dough, this is just a little bit of a learning curve. But even if it doesn't look pretty or collapses like it did for me the first few times I made stromboli, it will still taste delicious. So just give yourself a little bit of grace if you're learning how to do this, but you just kind of got to roll it out, add flour as you need, add water as you need, and just know you'll figure it out with time. Once the dough is ready, you're gonna put the prepped toppings on, then you're gonna fold the sides up, and then you seal it with a little bit of water. Go ahead and bake it at 400 degrees for 20 minutes. When you cut this up to serve it, cut off the ends. The top and bottom are just bread. There's not very much filling. Cut those off and put them in a bag because we are going to be using them Tuesday. Melt half a stick of butter and brush it over the top. If you have any Italian seasoning, you can add it here. This was actually a little bit too much butter, a half a stick, so you could probably just start with a quarter stick of butter. You can also do an egg wash instead of butter. So I've made double this recipe for a while. It used to be because we loved stromboli leftovers, but now with a growing family, we basically polish off 2 whole loaves. Tuesday is another labor-intensive day, but a little less than the day before. First thing is we're going to take the leftover stromboli bread to make breadcrumbs. So I've only done this a few times. I'm not entirely sure what is the best way to go about this. What I ended up doing is toasting the bread, and I put it in a Ziploc bag and crushed it. Eventually, I just chopped it into small pieces and got enough for this recipe. I'm using these breadcrumbs to make the turkey meatball recipe from the cookbook Food from the Heart, which is another one of my favorite cookbooks. I'm not following the recipe exactly. The original uses oatmeal and 3 pounds of turkey. So I just switched out the oatmeal for breadcrumbs. Again, here I am adding chicken bouillon and some other spices. So you just mix everything up, roll them out, and bake them, and then it's time to make the gravy. So this was my first time making gravy using sausage grease, and I have to say I was kind of skeptical because sausage grease does not look very appetizing. I melted it over a saucepan and mixed it with flour, and then I added milk. And in a separate pan, I sauteed mushrooms in butter. I wasn't really sure if I could have all thrown it in one pan. I just didn't want to mess anything up, but this gravy turned out so good. Everybody loved it. It really reminded me of a biscuits and gravy sausage you would get from one of those cozy diners. So I used half a stick of butter to saute the onions, and then I added a little bit of garlic in there, and then I added that to the main gravy pan. I will put a few more notes below on exactly how to make it, but basically you just kind of whisk it all together. Once it starts to get thick, you add in the mushrooms, salt and pepper, and then I added half of the turkey meatballs there. Sorry, you can see my burners are definitely not symmetrical. This is just how everything in my life is right now. It works, but not perfectly. I also made mashed potatoes. I'll put more directions down below, but it's one of those recipes that are really good, but just definitely takes some sweat equity to make. One thing that's really important is to really rinse the potatoes well. I like to use a mixer to mash them, and I added 1 stick of butter and about 1 cup of milk. So here is our final dinner. I was pretty pleased with it. If you wanted to add a bit more, you could throw in a can of corn or green beans on the side just for a little bit of veggies. This was definitely well liked by the entire family. Not much leftovers today either. Wednesday. This is a pretty easy day. We are going to be making my favorite garlic breadsticks. Again, with the bread making, if you're new to it, just give yourself a little grace and they will taste good even if they don't look good. I'm going to link the recipe I use below. The main thing with this recipe is that the breadsticks have to prove twice. First for an hour and a half and then for another hour. So since I wanted to have an early dinner, I started the dough at noon. If you do not have parchment paper, they will just be a little bit browner on the bottom. They will still taste fine. Instead of a parchment paper, you can also use a paper grocery bags. And I have these reusable parchment paper things that just get washed instead of thrown away. Once these are done, you melt half a stick of butter and brush over your breadsticks, and you can add garlic or garlic seasoning and Italian seasoning if you have it. The spaghetti is more work than I would usually do to make spaghetti. We are going to start by making sauce. So you're going to open your cans of diced tomatoes, blend them, and while you're doing that, you can start sauteing onion and garlic. Once those are kind of cooked, you're going to add in the blended tomatoes and any spices you feel like throwing in. I like to add a little bit of brown sugar, but I like mine a little bit sweet. So kind of up to your personal preference. I was actually supposed to put in the turkey meatballs, but I kind of just forgot and added in the meat mix from Monday. Either way would work fine. Up to you if you want meatballs or loose meat. So I added the meat. Then you're going to boil the pasta just slightly to al dente and then add them in the pot. If you do not have a Dutch oven, you can just use a casserole dish and cover with tin foil. Then I added the meat mixture on top, some shredded cheese, and topped it with pepperoni. I like to bake mine at a low heat, so I did 250 for about an hour and a half. Overall, the meal turned out pretty good. My family always likes these breadsticks. It was fine. Everybody ate it. Thursday's meal was pretty easy. We went back to the potatoes, lots of peeling potatoes. But other than that, it was pretty easy. You just saute onion, garlic, and chop up your kielbasa. Saute that in there. Then with your potatoes, you're going to boil them until they're soft. Cut them up and add them into the main pan. Then you can add in the sauerkraut. I thought about leaving the sauerkraut on the side. I didn't know if my kids would like it. I ended up putting it in the pan, and once it's all mixed in and heated up, it's really quite a milder taste. It's not like such a fermented taste. This meal was fine. It was a little bit bland. We had this spicy mustard that we ate it with that definitely helped, but this was the first meal that I was like, oh, not quite enough. I think if I was going to do this again, I would either double the meat or I would add like sauteed bell peppers and mushrooms, just a little more variety. Or I would just do brats, sauerkraut, potatoes. Something would need to be switched up. It was fine. We all ate. I was still a little bit hungry. Life moves on. Friday, to be honest, I was just kind of over budget week. Here are the remaining foods I had. Eggs, flour, milk, a stick of butter, 1 onion, some garlic, 2 Roma tomatoes, 8 ounces of cheese, spaghetti noodles, and turkey meatballs. Let me know in the comments what you would make using these ingredients. My first thought was going to be like a potato nachos, using potatoes instead of chips, but I ended up doing a breakfast for dinner, which is my husband's least favorite thing. Sorry, you just have to make sacrifices when your wife is trying to do a budget challenge. But I did make these crispy potatoes, which are one of my favorite things. They take a while to bake in the oven. I just used the last stick of butter, chopped them up small. They have to bake for, I think these were in there for almost an hour and a half total. So you have to definitely start with these. After that, I deconstructed the meatballs, put them on top of the potatoes. Then I mixed together all the eggs and milk and then topped it with the remainder of the cheese. We'll just say everybody ate, everybody was fed. Nobody was thrilled with dinner. So that leads us to the end of the week. Was this week a success? Well, I replaced money with time, so these were definitely more labor-intensive meals than I would normally make. I had much regret about getting the 10-pound bag of potatoes. It is just too much potatoes for 1 week. That being said, everyone was fed, and there was a few meals that were definitely a hit. If I was going to give myself a grade, I would say it was a C+, mostly just because we ended with like meh, meh. So it would just be hard to keep eating like this long term. I think adding in an extra $10 to $20, you could make these meals quite a bit tastier, a little healthier, and a little less labor intensive. But I will definitely be saving my sausage grease from now on because that gravy was so good. Let me know in the comments if I should do another budget week video or if you have any suggestions of what I could change. I was thinking maybe do some meals with beans or at least switch up the starches a little so it doesn't feel so repetitive. I did enjoy this challenge though and definitely learned a few new skills. Hope you enjoyed this video and got some cheap meal ideas. See you next time.